Jane Martin was born during the war years and grew up living alongside the Maitai River in a house at the foot of Mayroyd Terrace, long before the road bridge was built.
And it ran along the length from just above where the existing car bridge is now, right along to Gurley's Hole, so it was an ideal spot to grow up. But at that time that we lived there was no car bridge, it was just a footbridge, just like down at Hardy Street. And so any access by vehicles to go up the Maitai had to go right down to Bridge Street and come back up. But it made it a very quiet and safe area. And so this was that part of the Maitai was very much my backyard.
Jane recalls an era where children had a lot less supervision, even as preschoolers.
We weren't allowed to go swimming, but my mother was happy for us to spend all day pottering around on the banks of the Maitai, and particularly underneath the little footbridge, because she could go out onto our veranda and sort of peer over and see what we were doing. We would, make harbours, we would build dams, we would float sticks. As we got older, groups would go, and then we were allowed, of course, to swim by ourselves. And we'd usually try a swim in the August holidays, and that was just sheer bravado. But by Labour weekend, that was the time when the swimming season started, and it would continue through to about Anzac Day. There would be very rarely a day would go by where you didn't swim in the Maitai unless it was a really, big flood.
There was also fun to be had sledging down the bank from Cleveland Terrace to the river.
But in summer it used to get so dry that you could get your sledges or, even a sack and slide down there. Just had to be very careful where you got near the path, that you got off quickly so you didn't go into the rocks. But you could get quite good speeds coming down that area.
Jane loved finding small silver eels and kura in Gurley's Hole, and her brothers fished for trout. Although she didn't fish herself, she recalls a memorable fish dinner.
I didn't catch it, but he did. He'd most probably read about it in a comic, I would imagine, but he insisted you could cook a trout in 6 layers of newspaper, and you wrapped it all up in the newspaper, 6 layers, put it on a fire, and when the last layer of newspaper was burnt, the trout was ready to eat. I do remember the trout tasted foul and very bony.
Jane retired back to Nelson after 30 years of living away. All through that time, her Maitai childhood was a comfort to her.
When I lived away from Nelson, if I couldn't sleep, I'd often just recreate that Gurley swimming hole, and I could get it right down to sort of seeing the individual stones and the formation of the rocks, or sometimes just trace the river from the harbour right up to the dam, and just the way it went, and it would sort of relax me and I'd go to sleep.
Jane Martin, one of those whose story is entwined with Nelson's Maitai River.